Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show. So pleased to introduce to you our next guest, first-time author, Charlie Quimby. How are you this morning, Charlie?
Great, thanks a lot, Chelsea.
It is so wonderful to have you here. I've looked into your book, and I'm so thrilled to talk about your writing experience, what this book is about. It is called Monument Road,
Yep.
and you're doing a tour of sorts around the states, and you made your stop here in
Yes.
Park City.
Right.
And so we're so pleased to have you here with us. So first off, Monument Road, here it is. What is this book about?
Well, it's a story set in western Colorado, which is where I grew up. The story is about a rancher named Leonard Self who has lost his wife of many years, and he's made a promise to her to take her ashes to a favorite place up on Monument Road, which is a real place in western Colorado near Grand Junction. And she wanted her ashes distributed at this place. It was meaningful for her. And he's decided his life is over as a result of her death. She brought him connection to the world. He lived a very isolated life before he met her. And so she brought the world to him. And when she's gone, that world sort of went away. And as he takes this drive, it's a circuitous route. He has to go through town and wrap up a few things. And as he goes, he runs into people, he runs into memories, he runs over a tire in the road, he runs into a raven that's trapped in a plastic bag. There are all kinds of things that happen along the way. And he ends up intersecting his story with these other people who are also have very meaningful things that have happened to them on the road. And as a result, his course gets changed and his life gets changed as a result.
In this book, you cover many themes. One of the main ones, at least in my opinion, seems to be depression, or how we deal with problems and how that works with us mentally and emotionally, and how that ultimately brings us to a new realization of who we are and maybe who we should be. Discuss how you approach that in this book.
I approached it first of all from the inside of the character of Leonard Self. I want to say it's not a depressing book, even though it deals with his mental states as he goes on, because I didn't want to write a book that was about depression literally, but more thematically what it's like. It deals with depression, it deals with suicide. This location actually is in a national monument where people jump off cliffs to end their lives. My own father committed suicide, so I've had experience dealing with those issues. And I think with depression and suicide in particular, many people aren't comfortable talking about it. They're not allowed to acknowledge it. If they're manly men who run businesses or run ranches or something, they can't talk about these things. And so as a result, things happen that maybe shouldn't have to happen. So it was very important to me to do this as a story, not as a depiction of depression per se, or not as a tract about suicide and depression, but to give people a way to look at it and think about it, and maybe discuss it with people in their lives.
Along those same lines, for those who read this novel, what do you hope they take from it, especially if they are dealing with some of those similar issues?
Well, I would say, number one, that you've got to talk to your friends if you suspect there's anything going on in their lives. You've got to take an initiative. And if you're on the other side, if you're experiencing depressive things in your life, don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid to talk about it. But the important thing in here is that it's a story of a community that didn't even know he had a problem. But because he lived in a community a small community where it had these institutions that sort of watched over other people, he was still saved, and nobody knew they saved him.
Wow, that's amazing. And I do love that you touch on those themes of suicide and depression, though, like you said, it's not a depressing novel. It's meant to be uplifting. And the title, Monument Road, you kind of touched on this before. Where does that come from, the title?
It comes from a literal road that goes to the Colorado National Monument. It runs past my house in Grand Junction, Colorado. And it was called Monument Drive from the day I first thought of the book, but the name.
So for you, the title came before it was actually written.
The title came right at the very beginning,
Nice.
and the road and the landscape and that place really informed the whole book.
And speaking of the landscape and the themes, reviews on your book have called it a great big American novel or a modern Western. Why these adjectives attached to it, do you think?
Well, for one thing, even though it's literary fiction, so-called, and it is very character-driven, there are a lot of stories and currents and issues. Loss of the land, the divide between people who have money and people who have no insurance that are living in the same place. So it deals with some bigger themes. It deals with faith. It deals with different ways that people deal with why am I on this earth, and how can I fulfill myself? So there's some big things in the story. It's not just this closed internal view of this one man. It's these other stories intersect, and I think make it a big novel in that sense.
Very good. And in terms of the writing process and how long it took you to finally put your ideas and such together, you started this in 2009.
2009.
What was that writing process like
Well,
for you?
I actually had the idea of this road and the outline of a story from the very beginning. And I made a New Year's resolution at age 60 to complete a novel. I've been a writer all my life, but I'd never written a novel. And so, so there was that sort of resolution moment. There was that picture of the story. But as I began then writing it, it transformed totally. And the character who started the book as the main character is a very, very small character in the story now. And Leonard Self sort of blossomed. I put him in there because I thought, I need an old guy. I need a rancher. And that
Someone you can relate to, right?
Right, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
No, but literally, that's how he came in. I said, I'm writing about, too many of these people are alike. I need somebody different. And he literally began to expand and expand. And each time I wrote stuff about him, then I said, okay, he's got a wife. She died. How did she die? And as I built the story, I found myself, every time I came back to it, I was getting choked up. And I said, why is this happening? And I had to find out, so I kept writing Leonard, and it became his story.
And in terms of, I like how you say his story, it becomes your character's story, but of course, you mentioned some of your experiences, especially in dealing with your father, went into the writing of this. What is it like for you? I mean, this is a novel, of course, it's not a memoir, but though still there are some ideas I'm sensing that are in there from your life. How are you able as a writer to put that to paper and give it to the whole world to see? How does that feel?
Well, it feels great, and because they're transformed, they really aren't mine anymore. But there's a guy in here, for example, sort of a choir director that is described at one point as a beanpole baritone for Christ. He's gawky, he's kind of weird in a lot of ways, but he has a wonderful voice. And this guy is based on someone that I knew in high school, who ended up as a murderer.
Oh my goodness! I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, so this is not his story, but that character and that experience of that character gets transformed. So there's that piece of it, and then there's sort of the achievement piece that when people retire from their jobs, they don't necessarily think I'm going to start a new career or I'm going to do something new. And so what's been wonderful about Monument Road and Utah in particular is that this book is published by a Utah publisher, Torrey House Press. It got lifted up by a Utah bookstore, the King's English in Salt Lake City. And as a result of that, it's been picked up by booksellers all around the country. It's been named an Indie Next Great Read Pick for November.
That's right. It's amazing.
And
that's
you know, Wally Lamb and Amy Tan and Ann Patchett are other people in this company. So a year ago, I was about ready to say, I'm going to write the next book. I haven't found a publisher. I'll just get on with the next thing. And here a year later, I'm going out in the world and doing a book tour. It's amazing.
That is amazing. And so last thing for you, to other writers out there. I mean, you mentioned you're 60, and it's not like you were looking to start a new career going out there with that in mind. But it's kind of a beautiful fulfillment of the idea that you can continue to accomplish and do things that you never really maybe thought of before, or that you finally wanted to accomplish. What advice would you give to other writers out there, old and young, who are looking to write?
Number one, I'd say write. A lot of people talk about writing, or they say I've got a story and they don't do it. Another one is don't give up. You know, keep at it. You're not going to get it the first time or the second time or even the third time. And the third one is find somebody you trust who is going to read it, who is going to give you critique, but most of all, is going to encourage you, and that was my wife in this case.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us here today. Where can we find your book, Monument Road?
I will be at Dolly's here in Park City at 2 o'clock today signing books. This is not for sale generally yet until November, but again, because of the support that I got here in this region, we've come out, we've brought books out, we've made it available both in the King's English in Salt Lake City and Dolly's here, kind of as a thank you to the people here.
Very good. And can we find you online?
You can find me online, charliequimby.com. I've got a website with all kinds of information about the book, background. Thanks for asking.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. Really appreciate
Chelsea,
having you here this morning.
Great interview.
Oh, thank you. Well, it
Yeah.
sure was nice to have you here. I enjoy talking with these newer authors out there, and I'm excited to hear what's next for you. Is there another one in the works?
There is another one.
Oh, good.
You know, it's weird being a debutante author at my age, but there is another book. It follows on this one. Some of the small characters in this book get bigger lives in the next one.
Very good. Well, we'll have to bring you back on when
it.
we hear about that one. Very
Okay.
good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Charlie Quimby, be sure to check him out later on today at, remind us, Dolly's, right?
2 o'clock.
At 2 p.m. There you go. We'll be right back after this quick break. We'll be ending out the hour and let you know what